Okay, we will go ahead and get started. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's community forum for Paradise Valley Community College's Vice President of Academic Affairs Search. We are excited to have you with us. My name is Dr. Versha Anderson, and I am Communication Faculty and the current Faculty Senate President at PVCC and a Tri-Chair for the search. I'm joined by my fellow Tri-Chairs, Dr. Stella Perez, Vice President of Academic Affairs at Rio Salado College, and Mr. Wilbert Nelson, Dean of Arts and Sciences at Phoenix College. As a reminder, each forum is being recorded, and the recordings will be posted to the search site at the completion of today's forum. For our attendees joining us virtually, we ask that all participants turn off their cameras or video. Before we begin, we want to inform you all that live captioning and American Sign Language interpretation are available via WebEx. Thank you to Tiffany Jones and LaDonna Gabrielson for serving as our ASL interpreters. For those joining us virtually, you can pin Tiffany Jones and LaDonna Gabrielson to your personal screens as needed. Next, to provide an overview of today's forum, each finalist will have 15 minutes to explain how their background, expertise, and experiences have prepared them to be the Vice President of Academic Affairs at PVCC. Then we will open it up to questions from our in-person and virtual attendees for 15 minutes. Mr. Justin Johnson and Mr. Wilbert Nelson will moderate the virtual chat, and in-person attendees will be invited to come up to the microphone with their question. After the Q&A period, finalists will be given 5 minutes to provide closing thoughts and remarks, and at the conclusion of the forum, a feedback form will be made available. Thank you all again for joining us. Now I'd like to officially welcome Dr. Kris Roney. Dr. Kris Roney brings with her a faculty and administrative career focused on developing access and opportunities for students at the campuses she has served. She is a fierce advocate for students who believes that success is in students reaching their goals, even when they don't look quite like ours. Dr. Roney is currently the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, where she is responsible for the academic portfolio, including degree programming, planning, support, and budget. She previously served as Associate Vice President for Academic Programs and Founding Dean of University College and Graduate Studies at California State University, Monterey Bay. There, she led the university's response to the CSU Graduation Initiative, the efforts behind which helped push the university's graduation rates up dramatically. Prior to joining CSU-MB, Dr. Roney served in a similar capacity at the University of North Georgia, where, in her capacity as Associate Vice President and Founding Dean of University College, she was responsible for academic support for all undergraduate students across 4 campuses, all associate degree-seeking students, and space management, among other diverse responsibilities, including those of an active English faculty member. Prior to the consolidation that created UNG, she served in several administrative and faculty roles for Gainesville State College. She earned a PhD and an MA in comparative literature from the University of Georgia and a BA in English from Norfolk State University. Across her career, she has put considerable focus on student and faculty success as the PI and co-PI for more than $8 million in grants in support of student success and faculty development through the NSF, the Department of Education, and private funders. She is passionate about developing diverse leaders throughout her campus communities, and she seeks to continue the educational vision instilled during her own undergraduate experience. Hold the doors open and encourage everyone, especially anyone who thinks they might not belong. So Dr. Roney, welcome. Again, you will have 15 minutes to explain how your background, expertise, and experiences have prepared you to be the Vice President of Academic Affairs at PVCC. Dr. Stella Perez will serve as our timekeeper and will alert you when there are 5 minutes left, and again when there is 1 minute left. With that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yep, just making sure. Thank you, and I am also going to set so I can see the timer going. Hi, and thank you so much for being here, both present and virtually, which would also be present, just a different form of present. So if I were to title this, and this will come as no surprise to anybody who's been in higher education for longer than 5 minutes, I would probably title this something like Academic Leadership in the Midst of Change. If I were to subtitle it, because my degree is in comparative literature, and we do subtitle everything, I would probably have started to subtitle it until probably Wednesday night. Lessons from the Mosh Pit. Some of you have already heard, I often make light of my own love of punk rock and my conviction that I have learned as much from the Mosh Pit as I have from my educational journey, particularly in terms of our responsibilities for putting our hands out and pulling people up to safety. As of this week, I would have changed it to Lessons from the Volcano. As some of you know, as mentioned, I live on Hawaii Island in Hilo, and we have this very large volcano that started erupting this week. That would be the second volcano to start erupting recently. We've had Kilauea erupting for about 1.5 years now. So it's an interesting and transformative time in the island, and those transformations are some of the things I would point to right now. So if I were to gather these in themes, what has prepared me to be at PVCC in the VPAA role? I have organized and focused around student success, and I'll talk a little bit about those opportunities. I have worked through general education transformation. It's become a running joke, and I apologize that it seems to follow me wherever I go. But I have worked on it through every campus I've been on so far. Transfer success, learning opportunities for faculty and staff, budgeting, thinking about investment versus thinking about cutting, and changing organization and structure. That probably has underpinned much of my career. I started at Gainesville State College. Gainesville State was, at the time, a primarily 2-year associate's granting college with select baccalaureate. Stop me if you've heard that description before, please. The Gainesville State was a learning-centered college. When I saw Paradise Valley's description, I thought, huh. And then I realized it was the same thing. It was exactly that theory. And I was stunned. It had been so long since I had seen a college organizing themselves very, very specifically around learning and learning for everybody. A history in 5 schools for me. I was a traditional age in a non-traditional situation when I went to school, as were many of my students at Gainesville. I was a mother at 18. I was pretty sure I was never going to finish that degree. The one that I'd always been told I was going to college for, but what am I going to do? I had no idea how I was going to do this thing called college. So I tried. It turned out 4 different institutions. I regard myself as a prodigy in transferring because at the time that was not a typical transfer experience, or at least nobody talked about it that way. I didn't meet anybody who had that same story. But then at Norfolk State, somebody reached out their hand. They said, you can do this. You can do this. You will do this. And when you are finished doing this, you will take the gifts that you have been given of education, which is a responsibility of having this right and privilege. You must take it back into your communities. You must do something to serve. That underpins the vision of the HBCUs, and it absolutely underpins Norfolk State University. And that is the mantra that I learned. I was absolutely clueless as a transfer student. I mean, flying blind the entire, what do you mean courses don't transfer? What a ridiculous idea. Until somebody reached out their hand and said, hey, stop, listen, this is how you do that. Success for me ended up looking like somebody just affirming that I could do this, that I hadn't made the mistake that would end everything, that I could model education for my son. and I would return the gifts that were given. So at Gainesville, I tried to put those in practice in my classroom. I discovered that the way we were doing developmental education wasn't working. I started digging into data. That was my first deep dive into student success data, and realized that 6% of our students who started in Dev Ed ever finished a degree. And I was horrified that we were doing this in such a way that we were failing our students so badly. And I began to work towards what we could do differently. And eventually we did. And I'm very proud of the fact that the work we did in Georgia together through a Gates grant, experimenting with One Piece, experimenting with what was going at Baltimore Community College at the time, or Baltimore City Community College at the time, and put into place the developmental education system at what was by then UNG, that became the model in Georgia eventually. And I don't know how much of that was the actual work we did, or if it all just was happening on individual campuses, but I like to pat myself and the others on the back of the work we did as part of that. I was also engaged in the Roadmap Project. It was a project with AAC&U. And AAC&U at the time was trying to figure out how to work with community colleges. They had a terrible track record with community colleges way back in the day. It has improved dramatically. If you've ever seen their national meeting, community colleges are now taking a pretty good step in the voices. They're taking up a lot of that time to tell their stories, and that's great. Roadmap Project was one of the first opportunities they took to do that work. And it too led towards some developmental education changes. It was great conversations with other community college partners. What could we do differently? They let us stay in when the consolidation that created UNG was announced, and I am forever grateful because it allowed me to shape the University College, which served the mission of what had been Gainesville State College within the larger university. In providing student success and in providing student success support and other important features to student progress for students who are coming in, like me, with not necessarily the most traditional college story by comparison to the students who had been going to North Georgia College and State University prior to consolidation. I worked on several system initiatives that I tried to bring to bear. It was Complete College Georgia, the Adult Learning Consortium. I know that returning adults, when we start talking about enrollment, returning adults are an incredibly important part of our population. And certainly here, we can do much of the good in reaching out to those returning adults, those adults who need to change their jobs, who upskill, who never finished that degree because life or because other reasons got in the way, or they just decided that was not the moment for them. They might come back when they're ready. When I moved to California State University, Monterey Bay, it was following the work they did in high impact practices. And there again, I was given an opportunity to start a university college to support the first year, and then eventually, much more intentionally, the second year. That's what we were building out. We had a METAS grant that was intended to build out our career capacities to really start supporting the second year and the transition to graduate studies. It was an interesting combination to help bring those two areas up. The second year, of course, as all of you know, is huge. We tend to throw a lot of support at first year, and then good luck. You figured it out. I worked very hard with, worked very closely in all of my work with the Centers for Teaching and Learning that I was given the opportunity to work with. And I am grateful for what I learned from every one of those directors and every faculty and staff member who went through those programs. It seems like being in those conversations are the spaces where we can do the most good. When we model our own learning for our students, when we tell them, yeah, we don't know exactly what we're doing here in this moment, let me learn with you, let me learn in front of you. And literally opportunities like reading apprenticeship, where you model reading practice for students. It's transformative, and those are the kinds of things that I hope that in conversation we could have together. How do we move forward post-COVID? What teaching and learning practices do we look to address the needs of students in this moment now, which is wildly different than anything the rest of us experience, so we have to learn with them. I would say that there's been a considerable amount of resilience in the face of change over the last several years. And I think we need to credit our students with that resilience. And I think you need to take a moment, pat yourselves on the back, you did this. The students who are going to completion, that are finishing up, you were there, you walked with them. And celebrating that is one of the things that I try to make sure I do in my current role, and would do in the role here. You've done good work. Let's keep going. Let's keep building that good work and finding the things in the data, finding the spaces of opportunity, both for the faculty and staff and for the students. And for the students, to extend beyond both, that we don't yet have. But they're ours. They're still ours. In Hilo, I've done many of these same things. I have had the opportunity, though, to work with a college that has reminded me intensely of where I started. The HBCU systems and colleges and universities were designed around providing education to people who were being explicitly denied it. And where that sense of responsibility for taking back comes from. I work with a college now, Kahakaula, whose faculty and staff looked around, and specifically two of the faculty, the founding faculty, who looked around and said, our language and culture are dying. Olelo Hawaii is not allowed in the educational system, and why is that okay? It's not okay. And they began to rebuild. And in the course of 40 years, as a college for 25, they have rebuilt the educational system around Olelo Hawaii from preschool to a PhD. And that PhD is now serving other communities, tribal nations who are looking to revitalize their languages and cultures in the same ways that the faculty and staff of Kahakaula have committed to doing. That level of commitment is what I would expect of myself and do expect of myself, and what I expect when I'm within a community of a college. What is the vision of transformation? We have a series of responsibilities. What a privilege to be able to be in this space and build it together. Where do we find, where do we learn, and relentlessly move toward that vision? Thank you much. I unfortunately could go on and on and on forever. I would end with this. Learning is the heart of opportunity. And we have a lot of opportunities here. We don't have to we need to get on the same page. It doesn't have to be the right one the first time. We can make mistakes together. We need to be intentional in planning and design, but also have some fun with it and learn. Learn openly and transparently with each other and our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roney. We will now open it up to questions for 15 minutes. Again, in-person attendees are invited to come up to the microphone, and virtual attendees may submit questions via the WebEx chat. Mr. Justin Johnston and Mr. Wilbert Nelson will moderate the virtual chat. So I now welcome any questions.
Everyone was hoping there was already a volunteer. I saw those looks.
Hello, greetings. My name is Dr. Carter, and I've asked the same question of everyone, so that's why everyone's laughing, because here I am again.
As well you should. Always good.
I'm CIS faculty, but prior to becoming full-time faculty, I worked in the private sector, and as a manager, one of the most difficult things about leadership and managing my constituents or my employees was having to take direction from someone above me and still provide leadership and goodwill to my employees who perhaps didn't find it to be a very popular decision. We are a centralized system. Oftentimes, there's decisions that are made at a central location. Your position would still have to lead your constituents, which is students and faculty, and maintain goodwill, and they would still have to maintain faith in you as their leader, even though whatever decision it is, perhaps is unpopular. How would you handle that?
Thank you for that question. 2017, it was a Friday evening, about 5:34 p.m. You can see that I don't remember this at all. We received an email from the California State University system. It was a revision to Executive Order 1100. That would be the executive order on general education. From the point of view of the campus I was then serving, it was a massive change. We had an unusual, it was a little closer than it had been. We were created to be a different kind of college focused around high impact practice and outcomes-based education. And this executive order said, nope, no more. All of you get in line. All 23 of you have to have the same general education. It has to transfer reasonably. It had to transfer across the system. That was not an unreasonable expectation. It just hadn't always been put to practice. Oh, and Monterey Bay, that 4-credit-based system you have, good luck with that. You're not going to be able to keep it. We had to redesign from the ground up. I did not agree with the premise of much of the general education change. It was less than ideal, and not just because of the level of change the campus had to undergo. So the way I handled this, let me make sure I'm still, yes, good. The way I handled this was first to go to the faculty and sit and talk about their grief. Because it sounded for all the world like, man, you did this wrong. You've been doing it wrong for 25 years. Hand slapping, and that's not what it was. So first we worked through the grief. I heard their concerns. I took their concerns and my concerns back, one of which was about the timeline, quite frankly, because we were supposed to do it within a year. And anybody who's ever touched a catalog knows that that's not possible on August 17th. To get it in the following year. So the timeline was of concern. Some of the ways the requirements were written were of concern. So I took that back to my system counterpart and I said, look, here's some of the things we're encountering. My system colleagues, we all sat together and sorted through it together, talked, listened, learned. The reality was we were not going to change that executive order, but we could at least affect implementation strategies to take pressure away. And taking the pressure away was enough to be able to get people feeling like, all right, we can do this. The other thing I did was contextualize, and these are the two of the things that I think I do as a matter of course, but certainly that lesson was inculcated through this process. To contextualize what we're doing. This is, yes, we've got to function in the GE boxes. There's no doubt about it. We cannot change the fact that we're going to have to look on the paper like everybody else. But what we can do differently is we can still paint the inside of those classes. We can paint the curriculum in a way that still looks like what the campus envisioned for their programming. We can paint it by how we operationalize in our pedagogy. Do we embed reading apprenticeship? Do we embed first-year studies in different ways than we have done before? Okay, how do we do that? How do we keep service learning? Because that is so important to the culture of this campus, given all of the other requirements. Well, what if we embed it with that U.S. government requirement? What happens if we do that? Starting to play and think and be open to, we've got to fit the rules. We've got to fit the central vision, but we can also be ourselves within it. So what do we do to do that? So talking across, talking through, recognizing we're not all going to get what we want out of this. And sometimes it's not even as easy as, and I shouldn't call it easy. It's not even as easy as what the executive order presented, because sometimes it's just this is a thing that has to happen. And even then, it's to listen, to contextualize, and to take seriously that, you know what, sometimes we're told to do things that we may even realize aren't going to go well. And the best we can do is point out, here are the concerns we have. We're doing our best to operationalize it and doing our best to mitigate those concerns. How do we get creative around them to make sure that this, sometimes we make decisions in systematic and system level ways that don't land well and can't operationalize well in an individual institution. Whatever we can do to mitigate that until we move on from that particular decision is something I try to work with creative solutions for.
Did you want to go virtual?
No, you.
Okay. Trying to follow the rules. Good afternoon. Shannon Manji, Administrative Assistant for Academic Affairs. My question is, in your role as VPAA, should you receive that title, how would you not only build the culture and the community on this main campus, but also include and build our satellite campus, their culture and community and identity? How would you go about doing that?
Thank you for that question, and I would be deeply honored to have that title, I want to point out. So keeping an eye on the camera here. Hello. I'm really fortunate in this particular question. I started at a satellite campus. We were yay big. I can shock people with it. This was in the day, just bear in mind, this was in the days when higher education enrollment was booming. I mean, everybody was growing, they're feeling it. The worst thing that was happening was we had too many students. Something that most of us are not encountering anymore. But so we had 2,500 students in 17 classrooms. It was an adventure to schedule a semester. But one of the things I learned very quickly as a faculty member there is I never saw administration. I didn't see my dean. I didn't see the vice presidents. I saw the president, but it was only when I went up to the main campus. And that was a real problem because it made it easier to make those, and that's not even a system decision, but those decisions about the operations of the institution that missed because they didn't know the campus. That was true when we opened Cumming, which was another branch campus that opened right in the midst of consolidation. It was really important for people to show up because you had to listen and learn, and you could only do that if you're present and physically present. We know we have really learned the difference between virtual presence and physical presence. And I will say virtual has improved dramatically from those days. We did have it. It was horrible. And nobody had good Zoom etiquette. It wasn't even Zoom at that time, but nobody had good Zoom etiquette. But being present, physically present, made a difference because you could hear and see. So listening and learning what the needs are, the specific campus culture is really important to seeing a particular campus grow and thrive because the people there have to know they're seen and heard. And that really only happens when somebody shows up. That was my experience at Oconee, and when I was relocated to the main campus, what was then the main campus before it was consolidated, I kept that in mind, and I went down to Oconee regularly. I took the 75-mile trip to make sure I got there so that people still saw me present and so that I could hear what was going on. I couldn't make choices about tutoring, help guide those decisions if I didn't have any idea what was going on from the students and faculty and staff directly. So that's the kinds of things I would replicate based on my experience and make changes when I learned that other things need to be happening too.
Okay, question from the chat. Have you had the opportunity to work with the college athletic department and its students athlete in the academic arena?
Yes, because Dr. Roney Hopkins gave me that opportunity. While I was at Monterey Bay, the Vice President for Student Affairs came to my office, so I knew it was serious, real serious. It turned out he was on the way to the president's office, which was down the hall from me, but anyway, it felt serious. And he said, advising isn't working the way we need to for athletes. It's too disconnected from the realm of academic support that NC2AA requires. What can we do differently? Because we have somebody over there, and then we have the advising center, and we have student success, and somehow these things are not working together. So I was given the opportunity to, as he put it, make it work. And I think we did. And it really involved, this is going to sound like my previous answer actually, it involved getting everybody in a room together, talking through what was and was not working, and figuring out how to shift resources around so that athletes were supported the way they needed to be supported, so student athletes could be successful in all of the ways that they were engaging with the college. This was very similar, and I used the lessons I had learned from North Georgia when we consolidated and I inherited the Cadet Corps. North Georgia is one of the 6 senior military institutions. They have a Cadet Corps, and they had never had student support services that were dedicated to them before. And the commandant and I sat down, and he said, "So, I need some help. How do we do this?" So sitting and talking, hearing from students. Student athletes can tell us better what they need than we can predict on our own. But certainly getting the folks in the room who need to be together to do that was my experience. And I think we did some good in getting those needs aligned better than we had previously. I saw a lot more student athletes being able to use the tutoring center because of some conversations they had around timelines.
Thank you, Dr. Roney. And we have time for one more question.
The question is, why are you leaving Hawaii and the University of Hilo for Arizona and Paradise Valley Community College?
Thank you for that question, the famous question. Why are you fleeing the volcano? I'm not fleeing the volcano, by the way. I love the volcanoes. As I mentioned to a couple of places, or a couple of folks during today, when I was hired at Hilo, I had a search committee who was passionate about access. And it turns out that's not a vision that is shared broadly at the university. It's a very different educational vision for the majority of the faculty. And I value their vision. I just don't happen to share it. And I believe that they need a leader who can share that vision. While I am there, I do what I was hired to do, and I drive everything forward that needs to be driven. But I am a vision-centered and vision-driven person, as well as administrator. And it is important to me, I think I can best serve campuses such as Paradise Valley, who are learning-centered, and access and equity and opportunity are the heart and soul of everything we do. I used to describe University College as my heart and soul. University College was my heart and soul because it was about access and opportunity. University College, within the space of a larger university that wasn't necessarily open access, gave time and energy to students who didn't think they could do this thing called college. And that is what I want to help serve, is a community who's looking to engage students with community, who's looking to open the doors and hold them open. And I have heard some really cool ways that happens here. Music, I could go on for hours about everything I've heard about music industry here, and I will not do so since I don't have hours. Blow the doors open and hold them open in all kinds of ways, and that's not the vision for education that Hilo has, and I respect that. I just realized that they need somebody who shares that vision.
Thank you. So thank you all again for your questions. We'd now like to give Dr. Roney 5 minutes to provide closing thoughts and remarks. Again, Dr. Stella Perez will serve as the timekeeper and will let you know when you have 1 minute left. So Dr. Roney, please proceed with your closing thoughts and remarks.
Thank you, and thank you for being the timekeeper. I want to share a note of gratitude with you for having me here today, to give me a little bit of an opportunity to talk about educational vision and my hope. I think that what is happening here is truly powerful. What I see and hear from you, and I meant to grab my notebook so I could do here's some of the things I've learned a little bit more readily. But I hear a campus talking about how do we do better in terms of enrollments, which is important because if we're going to talk about access and opportunity, enrollment is a portion of that. I hear a campus who talks about sports and support systems in really creative ways. I saw one of the coolest maker spaces I have ever seen. Dudes, that is amazing. I hear from faculty and from staff voices around the importance of education and a community-based education where we bring thousands to campus tomorrow, where we center the opportunities for education in the community and for our students. Wow, you are really doing powerful things, and I commend you for those. It's a tough road to hoe. Community colleges have always had, if you've ever been a department chair, let me just say to you, you have the toughest role at the campus. Any faculty chair, by far the toughest role at a campus. Community colleges have a similar role when it comes to higher education. It's the toughest job we've got out there. And you are doing a tremendous job from everything I hear, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and learn a little bit more about you. So thank you very much. I wish you all the very best. And yeah, this has been totally, and I'm really, really glad I didn't make too many punk jokes, because I don't seem to have lost too many people, so yay. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Roney. And thank you everyone again for your time and engagement today. On the screen, you will find a QR code to access the forum feedback form. This form is also available via the search site.